There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, introductory language for virtual public meeting chairs. Pursuant to recently adopted amendments to the Illinois Open Meetings Act included in Public Act 101-0640, public bodies may, in certain circumstances, hold entirely virtual public meetings without a quorum physically present in any one location. Governor Pritzker's Executive Order 2021-27 has extended this provision through November 13, 2021. As chair of the Glencoe Council for Inclusion and Community, I have made the determination that it's not practical nor prudent to meet in person at this time. Accordingly, this meeting of the Glencoe Council for Inclusion and Community is being conducted virtually, with members participating through the Zoom webinar platform. Assistant Village Manager Sharon Tanner is in the Village Hall conference room as required by the Open Meetings Act. Okay, we don't have anyone else join. Shall we still do a call to order?
We can call the meeting to order. With 5, we do not have a quorum, so the group will not be able to officially conduct business, which means you can't vote on things, which really the only thing you had to vote on. Oh, I see Vivek might be in the, there you are. I see Vivek was in the attendees.
Did Raphael say he was joining us?
I don't see him here. I don't know if he may have had a conflict.
I didn't hear otherwise either.
Is it going to be an
I've been
issue?
with him? He never indicated that he would not be with us.
I don't know. I've not heard from him either way. Sorry, Hillary and Bob, you both were talking at the same time and I didn't understand what you said, Hillary. That's okay.
I wanted to remind you that I have to leave at 6. So I'm a little worried about how does that work if
That's okay.
we have a tenuous quorum.
That's okay. I also see a Kimberly Bjork signed in, but I'm wondering if maybe that's John.
I know he was planning to be here because he's gonna do an update a little bit, so.
I'm gonna promote 2 panelists, assuming that that is John. Why is that not working? Oh, there we go. John, is that you? It is John. Okay, super.
Had
Okay.
some laptop issues. I'm using my wife's computer. Sorry for the delay.
Context clues. I figured it out. Okay, I will call the roll and then we can talk through quorum after that. Sound good?
Okay, that sounds good. So, yeah, do you want to call the meeting to order?
Sure. Okay, Chairperson Clark,
Here.
Member Bjork,
Here.
Member Flanagan, Member Guzman, Member Molly,
Here.
Member Moses,
Here.
Member Mysal,
Here.
Member Rubin, Member Scott,
Here.
and Member Young.
Here.
Okay, so we do have a quorum. So we can take a motion to approve the meeting minutes. And Hillary, I know you've got to sign off at 6. With 6 people left, if I'm counting my tiles correctly, we will still have a quorum, but there's really no other formal votes that the group will need to take after the meeting minutes other than adjourning the meeting. So we'd be in good shape either way. You could still have a discussion without a quorum, but could not take formal action. So with that, is there a motion to approve the November 3rd meeting minutes? And I would just note that there's a Scrivener's error that we will correct to correct the date that's listed in the body of the meeting minutes.
I so move.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, I'm giving that one to John. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Chairperson Clark,
Yes.
Member Bjork,
Yes.
Member Molly,
Yes.
Member Moses,
Yes.
Member Mysal,
Yes.
and Member Scott,
Yes.
and Member Young.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Great, thank you. And this is the time in the meeting when a member of the public may comment on something that is not on the agenda. And I will ask Sharon to read any public comments that were submitted prior to the meeting. And then after that, I will ask if any members of the public would like to make a comment on something that is not on the agenda. If you want to make a comment about something that is listed on the agenda, please hold your comment until that time. If a member of the public would like to make a comment now, please press the raise hand button or *9 if you're joining by phone. The village's public comment rule limits comments to 3 minutes.
We did get one public comment submitted prior to the meeting. I will read it. It says, hello, everyone, or excuse me, hi, everyone. My name is Miles Mendoza. As you are aware, I'm an aspiring member of the Glencoe Council for Inclusion and Community. While I am excited at the opportunity to make Glencoe a more inclusive community, I wanted to ask a few questions prior to my interview. I see that video was available for the 2020 meetings, but not for the 2021 meetings. Are those videos recorded and stored by the city of Glencoe? If so, is it possible to ensure they are posted on the Glencoe website so I can gain more perspective on the history and evolution of the meetings? Intellectual diversity, as I understand it, is an environment wherein a variety of ideas, thoughts, and beliefs exist in meaningful interactions. Outside of characteristics based on immutable characteristics such as skin color or gender, are there any initiatives to ensure this committee is inclusive of the intellectual diversity that lives within Glencoe to ensure all of the community feels represented? Thank you, Miles. I would note that I will follow up with Mr. Mendoza outside of this dialogue about availability of the meeting videos. They are all recorded.
Great, thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome. And there are no other public comments.
Okay, great. All right, then let's jump into our agenda. First of all, I just want to say happy Hanukkah to everyone who celebrated last week. I hope it was nice. I know I was with a friend and it was nice, and the food, always food, so fun. And so that's why we're having the meeting today instead of our schedule last week. So thank you, Sharon, for moving that. And there's more food coming. It's like it doesn't end starting November, right? So we're just going to keep eating now until the new year, it seems like. So let's see, we have 3 items on the agenda that were put out there. Maybe we'll start with our first one, which is the immediate one for, did you want to talk about the progress report first? I was going to go on the town hall update first, Sharon.
Whatever you prefer, whatever order you'd like to take.
I mean, if it's really quick, we can maybe just address that, and then that way you can share the template. It might be nice for the group.
Yep.
To see the template. Okay.
I'd be happy to do that. And I think this will be very brief. So as the group is getting quite busy, which is excellent, we know there are a lot of moving parts with each of the subcommittees and the things that you're each working on. And to help facilitate conversation at our meetings and prep for those conversations, what I would like to suggest the group consider doing is using a very brief, short progress report template where each of the subcommittees can make basic bullet point notes, nothing in depth, no formal reports here. Just that we could share with the group in your meeting materials in advance of the meeting. So that way, if there's some logistics details, those can be simply noted. And unless there's a question or concern around those, we don't have to dive too far into the details during each meeting. So I'll put a template up on screen that I took the liberty of mocking up. And if you like it, we can consider using it. If you don't like it, we don't have to. We can scrap it and go back to the drawing board. But again, let me toggle over to my screen share, find the correct screen. Here we go. Okay. All right. You should be looking at my Word document that says Council for Inclusion and Community Subcommittee Report. I see a couple of nods. Super. The basic goal is to just do a brief 1-page. You may not need all of these fields, but I just put a couple in here just to help keep track of some of the moving parts. What I would hope is that if you want to use this, each subcommittee could designate a person to keep track of this. send it to me the week before your meeting materials go out, and I'll include it in your meeting materials. So that way the whole group can see your notes of what's going on, if how you're working through some of the milestones or tasks that you've identified for yourselves. Very basic information, what the initiative is, the date of the event, if it's something that's a specific date, who's the leader of that subcommittee. So if there are questions, the group knows who to go to. Some of the logistics details, whether there's a budget, a location, resources that are needed, village staff support that's needed. That will help us. I will say on the village side, as staff support, it may be needed for some things to be sure that we're planning in advance and we're being sure that we have our staff resources available. Some milestones or tasks that the group identifies for your initiative. It could be a couple of things, it could be a handful, whatever you feel is appropriate. When you're hoping to complete it and what the status of it is, if it's not started, if it's in progress, if it's completed, just very basic. And then if there's questions or feedback or decision points that are needed, this is kind of a highlight section for the group. So if there's a question about, do we want to do A or do we want to do B, that could be noted here. We could make note of when we need to make that decision by and make note of what the outcome is. Again, the goal is not for this to be overly cumbersome or to create more work. I know you all have things that take your time outside of this group. We're grateful for the time you share with us, but I'm hopeful that this could help us keep track of things and help facilitate the dialogue as each of the subcommittees is working through their items.
And I,
Looks good to me.
Pardon?
It looks good to me.
Okay.
I agree.
Agree. It's excellent. I think it'll help keep meetings on track as well.
Great. Okay, well, I will send this out to you so that way you can begin using it. If it's helpful, I can mock up a template or an example just to give you a flavor of what one might look like completed. If that's helpful, if not, you don't have to use that, but the mock-up sample that is. But I will send this out and maybe we can aim to start using these beginning in January for our January meeting. So that way we can start to populate that in the agenda packets.
It actually might be, this is really great. Thank you, Sharon. It might be nice to just take our current, one of our bigger current activities for the town hall and put that as a template. That way it's kind of work in progress and it's done in your template.
Great. Yep, we can do that.
Perfect. Thank you. And then why don't we jump into the town hall, the upcoming town hall? So I see just Anise and Bob are here. Would you guys like to give an update?
You can see me, my camera's on. Okay. I think we came up with, Sharon, do you have the thing that you can put it on?
I do.
The title. We were coming up with some title names and Sharon had a great point, so we modified it a little bit. Because we have 3 people coming on, one that's talking about his personal experience being a fully abled person and then experiencing a life as a disabled person and sort of how he became an advocate on behalf of people with disabilities. And then we have someone talking about the aging population and then also around dementia. And then we have someone talking about definitions of disability and the work that she does through the Cerebral Palsy Foundation, although she does not only work with people with cerebral palsy. So that all being said, to kind of combine all those, we came up with defining disability through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, moving towards a more aware and accessible community for all, or with a semicolon. That was the big difference that we sort of were coming around to, and or anything else. I had run these by the speakers and they had all thought that was okay. I did make a change because it was originally Glencoe specific, and since some of the speakers are coming from different communities and having a different perspective, they probably don't know the things that Glencoe has or doesn't have, or the direction that they need to move. The primary person that has that vision and specialty is Emily Mizell. So she'll be speaking to that and some action items that we can take in Glencoe. And then the other ones are just a little bit more umbrella-ish. So we wanted your feedback on that, how you guys felt about the town hall title.
Is it the entire, it's this entire quoted portion? Like one versus the other?
Yeah. The idea of shortening it, saying DEI came into play, but one of the things that Bob pointed out, and I don't know if it's the, you know, just sort of the demographic that he's sort of talking with, or just in general, that not everybody's totally clear on acronyms or, you know, what DEI is. And that's part of what we're trying to do in the work that we do. So that's why I spelled it out as opposed to using an acronym.
I feel like I'm not sure what the improvement would be, but it just feels too long. I don't think if I saw it, I would likely, I don't know. I'm not sure I'd make my way through it to say, oh, let me, you know, jump on and do it. I'd love to see if we couldn't, not as a group, but see if we couldn't come up with just a few words that would try to represent it. Not DEI, I agree with you, it's not enough, but I think it would be better if we could find a way to brevity a little bit, but
Well, we could probably take out the lens of.
I mean, just something like increasing awareness of to be a more accessible community, or I don't know, something just, I'm not saying that's right, but just that short is what I'm thinking. But you know, those things take a lot of little monkeying around on the page to get it right. But if you're
Well, and
open
what
to it, maybe a few people could shoot you some ideas, and if it's never
Sure.
better, that, you know, then we use the longer.
Anise, do you think there's a, I talked to Raphael a little bit about this too and was just kicking around some ideas in my head, and I don't have anything better, but I'm wondering do we need to have a reference to DEI in the title itself? Do you think that's important? Or could it be something that just talks specifically about, you know, this specific topic, you know, disability and access, versus trying to weave it into the broader DEI concept? In the title, I realize that there's overlap, and there's certainly it fits within that rubric, but I'm wondering if the title needs to reference DEI, or if that's just going to be more language than it needs.
I would agree with John on that point, because our town hall series has been, you know, the lens of DEI for all. We probably don't need it in your definition. The other comment I have is, when you're talking about moving towards a more aware and accessible community for all, I mean, it's so broad, and I mean, you know, we're talking about an inclusive community for all throughout our conversations. So if we just say maybe moving towards a more aware and inclusive community for all, that would include the accessible. So it would have the disability that we're talking about here. That would be my only comment.
So defining disability, comma, moving towards a more accessible community for all.
And I
No,
just
you didn't say
suggest-
accessible. What was the other word you said?
I said more aware and inclusive community for all.
Okay.
Because I mean, accessible only sounds like, you know, maybe physically accessible, right? And so inclusive could be in many ways. It could be, you know, hiring disabled people from the community there, or, you know, other things. Like, just, I think inclusive just kind of puts it under the umbrella, goes along with our name.
Okay,
And-
so
and-
so defining disability, comma, moving toward or towards a
Can I just-
more aware and inclusive community for all.
But
Yeah?
then now, when I look at it, it sounds like defining disability is just kind of hanging there. It was, I mean, because are we defining disability or are we,
Yeah, because a lot of people think of
Experiencing it,
disability, you know, people have sort of a stereotype of what disability is, you know, like when you park in a certain place, you know, there's someone in a wheelchair, or, you know, I think, you know, we're trying to define it, like what the speakers are going to do is define it on a much broader terms.
so why don't we say understanding? Because isn't that the goal, is for us to understand what disability is?
I was taking notes as we went and just listening to this dialogue. If I could make one suggestion, just a different punctuation, just punctuating it slightly different. I put it up
Okay.
here on the screen. Define disability : moving toward a more aware and inclusive community.
That's great.
Yeah, that's
That's
good.
good.
But again, I don't know if it's defining or it's, so.
I just, what's
defining
wrong
is
with
like,
just moving towards either moving towards a more aware and inclusive community, or just becoming a more inclusive community? And what, I'm not sure what the defining does for us.
Yeah.
Like, right? I mean,
well, to me, defining is like you're telling something, whereas like when I would like to be at the receiving end. So if I'm at the receiving end, how do I feel? Like at the receiving end, I'm trying to understand it, right? Because we're getting these speakers into our community so that we have an understanding. So that's the only reason I was thinking it's better to kind of go from like the community's perspective. We are understanding, because I just don't want to come across as the council who is trying to define these things for the community, because that's not our goal. We're bringing in people to talk about this for the understanding, because
Well, obviously it's not us. I mean, underneath this are the people who specialize in this field with their, bios and their pictures and like a little
right.
blip on what, I don't think anyone's going to think that we're doing that. Raphael's trying to get on, but he can't find the Zoom link. Sharon, can you maybe resend it to him?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
see, so one thought I have is that this quote, becoming, either moving towards or becoming a more aware and inclusive community, part one, part one, because it's such a good title. I think we might have future events that fall under it that aren't the defining disability one. So I almost wonder if you took the defining disability as a sub point, like that's what this one is, and future ones could still be under that moving towards the more aware, but maybe we'd have race or religion or others. We got lots of things that fall in our under the DEI thing. So
well, the only concern I'd have if you did like part one, that then people would like somehow assume that part two is going to be the next one, which that it's going to be
Might
a
not.
different topic. You know what I mean?
yeah. So just
Is
another.
it toward or towards? I don't know. I wrote towards, but Sharon, you're writing toward, and I'm not a grammar, queen. I'm not sure. Does anyone know?
We could probably hash that out separately once you have the concept down.
Moving toward a more aware and inclusive community defining disability. That's fine with me.
I don't think I think just I appreciate working towards slimming it down. I don't feel, as I see it, you could flip it either way. I'm okay. But
Could it be, instead of defining like, exploring disability?
Yeah, I don't have strong feelings about it, but I do share Dipty's belief that maybe defining comes off a little bit like we're the authority on it, that we're making the definitions. If I would tend to lean towards understanding or something other than that word, but I don't think it's.
Understanding is good.
Yeah, actually, this last one, I think, has a better tone to it.
Was there
I
consensus?
would like to just share that with, like, just share it with like a friend or somebody and just say, hey, because we're all so into it. We all kind of know what it is and what we're going to do. But if you just want to share it with a couple of people like that are not part of our meetings and been involved with this, to see if they would go to something like this and what it means to them, and if they understand, like, what might be covered, then I think, you might get some more feedback, because I mean, it looks fine. It's very broad, and I mean, just would people know that this is about disabilities and just go to it.
You could ask the speakers, I mean, if you want, just to keep it and see, does this hit kind of where they were headed or something without.
Yeah, because that's what I did in the first place, like, because I deferred to them because I felt like that was the right thing to do. I wouldn't want to show up being a speaker and like having some title that I'm like, oh, it's not my thing. So yeah, I can share this with them for sure.
I mean, I think that the word understanding is a very good choice. But I think the most important thing is that we as a group focus like a laser beam on reaching out to those organizations that can help us reach as many people as possible. Those organizations in my mind are Glencoe School District 35, New Trier Township. I think I mentioned to you that I spoke with the administrator at New Trier, who was more than glad to work with us on a future town hall, as well as this. I think it's reaching out to houses of worship, and I think it's reaching out to, obviously, Family Service of Glencoe and the several psychologists who have practices in Glencoe. They can identify people, groups. They have the resources with online material or printed material to let those people know about the town hall in February. We've got to do that, again, like a laser beam. Otherwise, we risk talking to ourselves. Posters are helpful. No question about it. I'm all for seeing posters plastered all over Glencoe. But those organizations that I just listed really are probably in the best position to reach out to audiences and involve them. And I think—
Hey there, everybody. It's Raphael. Sorry, just wanted to say I'm sorry for joining so late. Go ahead, Bob. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Good to hear your voice, Raphael. That's where we really need to focus our energy, regardless of the definitions that we see in front of us. And I think understanding disability is a great one. We need an audience. And that's very, very difficult, as I've said repeatedly, in our society at this moment. Getting their attention is really, really difficult. So hopefully those organizations that I listed are in a position to help us. What do you think?
Agreed.
I would always remind the group that while the village will advertise this in our communication suite, the members are certainly encouraged to share it with any groups or entities that you feel would be interested. So perhaps that's something that each group member here can take as a homework assignment once those marketing materials are out, to share it with the groups that you feel might have an interested audience.
How does that work, Sharon? Like, so are we able to just post whatever? Like, a lot of times I see things on Nextdoor and it's you guys like putting stuff out, but we're able to just take promotional materials that are from the village and kind of say, hey, I'm a member on this council, please attend. If you have any questions, send me a message or whatever, we can do that. Okay, cool.
Yep, that's a very easy way to do it. Just reshare what we create.
So I have a question. Initially, we had talked about the ableism as the topic, right? I mean, it had started with ableism. I remember last time we spoke. So just wondering if we want to learn instead of maybe, because again, like, sorry, I'm doing this, I said understanding, and now I'm thinking like, you never really understand disability personally if you are an able-bodied person, right? So like, what are we trying to learn how to treat people like better, or how to fight that, barriers that are there, or I mean, act better, or I don't know, advocate for some different kinds of policies or something like that, like do we want to say disability, or do we want to, I don't know, I kind of like the term ableism when we had talked about it last time, and it kind of seemed to hit home with much more than, because when people think of disability, I don't know why they always only think of physical, right? But it's so much more than just physical.
I think we're gonna have to count on our speakers to like Damien will talk about ableism. But when I floated the word ableism around, like, people had no idea what that was. So if we wanted something, like, if we want a shorter title, I don't think we can have ableism in there, because I don't think anyone's gonna really know what that is.
My point is that whether it's ableism or disability or whatever, we have to focus on engaging with people. In the course of a dialogue, talking with people, we'll be able to sort these things out. Otherwise, we will end up talking to ourselves.
I think you're right, Bob, but I think we're just talking about, what title can we get that's most accessible to people just on the surface, and then, we'll do things.
And pretty much all of these that are listed say pretty much the same thing. So, it's just pick one and let's go with it.
That's my thought. I think, you have the feedback and make a call, on
Take it back, Anise, work on it, talk to whoever you need to, and pick one.
So
Raphael, are you there? You're
Sound like
breaking
you're
up,
in
Raphael.
space.
yeah, right here.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Nothing, you just
breaking
sounded like you were in
up. You had
space.
something you were going to
Oh
say.
no. I'm not in space. I'm sadly in a car in a parking lot because I misscheduled many things, but that's a different topic. Just to go back to what you just said. So should the subcommittee just pick a title, run it through the chairperson, and then send it over to Sharon to get final approval so we can get it on the marketing, so that way we can start doing everything come the new year? Is that an agreement?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me.
And from here, let me know what you decide, and we'll get the materials out.
Raphael, do you want to talk about, you were going to talk about the marketing piece and part, sort of like a different approach to it?
So in conversations within the individual conversations within the subcommittee, it's been said several times that not many people in Glencoe know who our committee is, what we're about, what we do, et cetera. And that was one of the topics for perhaps a town hall meeting, was to discuss what the committee for inclusion and community, or the inclusion and community, DEI, whatever you want to put it, if a topic should be what is DEI, why does it matter, how does it affect, et cetera. So when I was talking to Bob, I thought about what if we, and I sent a mock-up to Sharon, what if we distribute flyers with the I'll call it the Glencoe Tower symbol, and it basically says, I came up with a couple individual questions or points like, what is DEI? Why does it matter? How does it affect me in Glencoe? With the point of at the bottom having I think it's called a QC code, which was made incredibly popular through menus, where you take your phone, you take a picture of the code, and it automatically will send you to the website associated with that code. And initially, I thought that it would be a great segue to have people, if they're in hometown, Starbucks, the library. I know the Banks has a community bulletin board, the Grand, et cetera. If they're sitting there standing in line, they see it, they can scan it, and they can see what exactly our committee is. And then right next to that code being another one, which would divert them to a website that discusses what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. And individual emails to each a subcommittee member. And Anise was great in finding websites that were associated with universities, because Bob pointed out what we don't, we want to present a subjective, neutral background opinion fact finder for DEI that isn't tied to a political party, a government entity, things of that nature. The ones that I did find, and we researched quite a bit, that involve the government, all discuss DEI and some even ableism in means of human resources. And a lot of it was federal government and how they do DEI, but I'm starting to ramble. But the point was to get a flyer out, maybe 2 QC codes, one to our website so they can look it up, and another one to an educational based website explaining what DEI is. Again, I sent a rough draft to Sharon about it. Just the flyer that I made up on a whim. And I don't know if the committee thinks it's a good idea, a bad idea. It was just something that could get people to have an opportunity to be informed. Oh, thank you, Sharon. That's it right there. And I didn't hand draw anything, so please don't give me accolades. It's amazing what you can do with a copy and paste on the computer. So, but I don't know if the committee thinks this is just a waste of resources. But I figured it might be a tool that we could use to get our message out to people besides just what we've currently been doing.
No, I think
I think it's fantastic, personally.
No, I think it's part of reaching out, and I think it makes perfect sense. Do it.
Sharon, did you get my email with the educational, with the websites about DEI? Because I know you asked to look at them so that way they could be a true, objective, neutral type of informative source.
I did get your email, though I have not had a chance to study each of those sites.
Oh, that's fine. No, it was several, and it was, I believe one's the University of Michigan, and again, Anise was able to get these through her contact at the school district. So they also referred to a book that the school district is used for training purposes for DEI. But again, I think as a committee, this is something that we should agree on as a whole. It's something to do, and move forward from there, I guess.
And I think one of the things that I did a little research when Raphael came up with this idea, and I think that you can change the information that comes up on a QR code. So like if we had something up with a save the date for a town hall that's happening in February, we could change it from a computer to say save the date for our town hall in April, that you're able to change it and that people can scan it and the information can change. But am I correct? Or did I make that up? Do you know, Sharon?
I believe that you can, but I'll admit that I'm not an expert on that. One thing that I always will suggest is drive back to the village's website. So drive back to on the village's website, and we can always post those updates there. That's a good practice for us generally to consider.
And while we're on this topic, Raphael, I sent you a message this morning. Sorry, I'm a little tardy, but with a few more definitions from universities and also just a dictionary definition of DEI. I had trouble finding any that didn't reference, as you said, HR, or if they were in the university context, like what DEI means in a campus setting or a university setting. But hopefully what I provided, may be of some use, but I can keep digging if you need it.
So what is the goal of this flyer? Are we trying to educate people about DEI, or are we trying to educate people about us and our council? Because if we're trying to educate people first, I would say we should put our council information out there, what our goals are, what our mission statement is, because we've worked extensively on it. It's there. And so I would actually put all that information there. And then, if you want supplement.
Just bring the whole kettle. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know I was not on mute.
If you want to put supplemental information, I'm okay if you want to put links to understand DEI in general, but I wouldn't make that the focus because that takes away from what we're doing in the community as a council, so just a thought.
No, agreed, Dipti. The initial idea was, I think Bob was manning the table at the farmers market before the last town hall meeting, and people had no idea what we were about, or what was the point of the committee. So the initial idea came up, instead of devoting an entire town hall meeting over DEI and who we were, this is just something that the initial QC or QR code, I'm sorry, I forgot which one it is. The first one would go to the actual village, our website, to our committee, which has our statement, says what we're about, and lists the names of everyone. And then I thought that another code could be put on there, and if people, unfortunately, this is not uncommon, they don't know what DEI means. And it was intended to give the committee, us, more exposure within the community. Like I said, while they were in line getting a coffee or waiting for food for carry out. But a supplemental information would be like a point to educate people as to what DEI is, because and then more importantly, do it from a objective source, and not be accused of us leaning left or right in regards to politics, if that makes sense. But the initial point was to get exposure to the committee itself, and to go directly to the village website, our website, for people to look at.
Yeah, I would focus on what our council is. We don't even have DE&I in our name, for the council, we don't even have the whole thing, right? So I would definitely focus on what we do as a council. And then I understand the community needs to know what it is, and everybody should speak the same language and talk the same talk and walk the same walk, but we all don't, and we all come from different walks, and we all come from different talks, and we still get along. So you're right, it could become political, it could become very accusing, and that's the thing. I mean, this is the first time we're putting it out there for people to know about us, and the last thing we want is someone to go, oh, not that again, or something like that. I mean, it's just very easy. I almost feel like what would be really nice is, if we want to build that awareness in the community, that we pay for a professional speaker to come and conduct a workshop in our community that they do this for a living, and that they would focus on this topic. And then we are just kind of the carriers of that, just not carriers. What's the word I'm looking for? Somebody help me. We're just like the
Messenger.
Yes,
Messenger?
or yes, or facilitators of that community awareness program, if you may. And we're not taking it all upon ourselves to find these links to these websites. And, you know, somebody may not agree with one thing on one side or one thing on the another side. So, you know, that's my gut feel. I feel more comfortable putting in what we know, what we do, what's in our control, and then, you know, have programs that we get paid professionals to kind of educate about, specifically about DEI. So.
Yeah, I really don't think we need paid professionals. In a community like Glencoe and New Trier Township, there are many, many people who have the expertise and the willingness to speak without being paid.
Well, I mean, if we can find someone who can speak without being paid and yet is an expert or has a work experience in that, that's fine, Bob. I mean, you know, that's not what I meant. That, you know,
It's a layup. It's a layup. We can do that easily. We can do that easily.
Which is fine. What I'm saying is that adds credibility in a lot of ways. And I think that's really what the community would be looking for, is that credibility. You know, sometimes a title with a person or some bunch of degrees or work experience, and
Well,
that.
think about the credibility that, for instance, a staff member at Family Service of Glencoe would bring to the conversation. That's all the credibility we need. They have very, very good people there. So spending money, I think, is not necessary, not in a community like this. The expertise.
I think that we're kind of diving off topic. Dipti, to your point, I believe that bringing someone in, whether it be paid, voluntary, etc., it's important to get several different points of view in, whether that be from political left, political right, or professionals in the category, in the area of DEI, or in the areas of other fractions of that. I think that would be wonderful for either another town hall meeting or for a speaking series. But bringing this back to the idea of the flyer, if we're not sure and don't want to put any information as far as what DEI is and sourcing these other materials, that's fine. The initial concept, the initial idea was to give the committee exposure, because Bob was telling me that day that he was manning the table, people had no idea what our committee was.
And that I would 100% agree with, that in any way that we can build exposure and awareness about our committee is, our council is, I think, definitely beneficial. So yes, I did hear about that. It just sounded like we were more focused on, you know, universities and what they're doing for DEI.
No, it was just another idea that I floated, that maybe we could have two of those little code bars at the bottom, one for our committee, another one for people that wanted to self-educate. But to your point, in order to just concentrate on our committee and concentrate on our mission and whom we are, then I think the code should only link up to the village's website, to the committee's website, explaining who, what, where, when.
And we should put it open, like, you want to learn more, come meet one of our council members, you know, like, here's, like, they should have the link to, you know, either send an email to, you know, and I think the email goes to the village, but yeah, I mean, just, you know, like, get engaged. How would you like to get involved? How to get involved, or, you know, come to our meetings or talk to one of our council members. Then
right.
That way we are keeping ourselves out there for them. We've made ourselves available. So if anybody wants to reach out, they can. I would rather not get into educating them on other people's material, quite honestly. Just
to Raphael's point about in September, when we were manning a table outside the village hall, I shared with you that a woman, a Glencoe resident, whose grandson, 7th grader, identifies as non-binary, asked, what could she do? I told her about the purpose of our council, and I suggested that she reach out to the board of New Trier, because she learned that the advisories were segregated. I was shocked. I mean, my kids went to New Trier High School. My wife went to New Trier High School. My mother-in-law went to New Trier High School. I never realized that the advisories were segregated. Her concern was the effect that it would have on her grandson, who identified as non-binary. She contacted the New Trier board, and I went to the board meeting several weeks ago that was packed with people who wanted a change in the advisories, which subsequently the board voted to change, so that children coming in would have a choice of the kind of advisory that they would want to be involved in. So again, that goes to my point, to getting our hands on people, talking to them. You want to sell a car, you got to kick the tires. You know, I was a fundraiser. You want to get people to make a major gift, got to talk to them. And I think that was an example of someone who responded and made real progress in terms of a very important issue that's relevant to our mission. And I want to be very clear, the discussion about changing the advisories had been in discussion for some time. It just didn't begin with this woman, but she jumped in and helped move it along.
So if I could maybe summarize what I think I'm hearing for the group, since we are approaching the bottom of the hour, and I know several members have other commitments this evening. The idea of a flyer with a QR code driving back to the village's webpage. Quick parenthetical note, Emily and I are working on some updated content for that as a homework item, so more to come on that. Rather than focusing on external resources for the time being. Is that about the tone of what I think we covered?
That's how I interpreted it. I don't know if anyone else has a different interpretation.
Okay. And we're happy to help with artwork for that too. We're happy to help put together a draft for that. So I'll take that as a homework item for Emily and myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sounds great. So is there anything else you guys want to discuss about the town hall?
We're gonna need more help down the home front. John is throwing his hat in the month of December. We're just going to wait for the marketing materials, and hopefully by the next meeting in January, we'll have a better idea as to what the flyer / poster will look like. Also, if you're part of the subcommittee member, I'm starting a training regimen. We're gonna start working out Tuesdays and Thursdays at 5 in the morning. We're gonna do like Rocky style, where we eat raw eggs. So if you're in, let me know. And again, I mean, we gotta be fit come February, folks. So, I mean, a lot of talking and a lot of listening. So if you guys want to lose some weight, give me a call.
We were just talking about all the eating we have to do now between November and January. So sounding like a good
That's why we're
plan.
starting at 5. That's why we're starting at 5 a.m. Dipty. That's why. Gotta get the hours in.
So if you're looking for help, I just heard you say you're looking for lots of help. Maybe it'll help our other members if you just want to kind of just identify what you're looking for ahead, like if it's leading up to the town hall date and then on the day of the town hall, you know, maybe before, you know, an hour before, and that way people can volunteer and help out.
Yeah, we'll have a more integrated and detailed list at the January meeting, so that way everybody has an idea of what we need to do and what needs to be done and who can help. That's not a problem.
Great, thank you.
I think that Hillary submitted like a feedback form template, and if that can be something that's either like approved or, you know, edited or whatever, so that we can kind of take a look at that in January would be great, because we'd like to have that for sure for the feedback for the town hall. But then also we were talking about just some more like general kind of, you know, how are we doing, you know, what are you thinking about, you know, what's going on in the community, that kind of stuff, kind of like a more open-ended thing that would just be on the village website, you know, to the same email. That would be good if maybe she sent that to the office, I think, or no.
I'll check. I believe she did.
Okay.
Let me scan back through my email.
Okay, I know you get a lot.
I do. I'm sorry. Forgive
It's
me.
okay. No, it's okay.
We can certainly include that in the packet for the January meeting, and that'll be a good example of something that we can attach to a progress report too.
Great. So did you want to bring up the question you had about for a town hall, if a participant is going to be monetarily compensated for their role as being a participant in the town hall? Is that because we have never discussed this before, and we've kind of assumed that we've invited someone to town halls in the past and they have come and graciously given their time and input. But if that is something this group wants to talk about or take it back, think over and come back and discuss in January, that is fine with me as well. I have an opinion, and I think Sharon is aware of my opinion. Gary Rubin is not available today, but I briefly asked him, so I gave a little bit of his feedback, but just wanted you guys to think about it as we plan more town halls and more events.
I think one of the things Hillary had some thoughts on this, but I know she's not on. I think one of the things that I've been reading about, and it's been interesting, is just about how when, particularly when you're asking someone to do a presentation where it's not just that they're talking about something that they're educated around, but it's something that is their lived experience, right? So if they're a person of color, if there's someone living with disabilities, if they have experienced some kind of, trauma or some kind of whatever, that the messaging around paying people for their time, not because they're not willing to volunteer it, or they're not being generous and they want some compensation, but that there's something to be said around that. When people are going beyond their expertise and they're sharing a personal story and sort of revisiting something that is difficult, that we recognize that when people are talking or sharing their experiences, that's valuable in a way that, in our society, the way that we kind of say somebody did a good job is that they get paid, and that a lot of organizations are moving into a different kind of approach to speakers who are talking on those topics to compensate them. We're not talking, massively, but just, to compensate in that way. A lot of people are parts of organizations that they founded on behalf of their whatever they're talking about. It's just a new way of sort of thinking about working with people and giving people credit for their time. Hillary was much more articulate about it, so I'm sort of giving like messy cliff notes, but it came up only because when we were putting together the speakers, I asked Damien, because all of a sudden I started getting a feeling that maybe there was a cost to his presentation. And he said, sometimes people make a donation to my organization, or, he does get paid to be a speaker. Like, that is sort of what he does. But he is a friend. And so I kind of said, well, I didn't want to make it weird. And so I just sort of said to him, well, what do you get paid? And he was like, well, you don't have to pay me that. And we had a whole back and forth or whatever. And he ultimately said he doesn't need to get paid. But I did get information from him about like what people get paid when they're telling their stories, and it's different person to person, of course. And it was just something that, he's going to come and do his presentation, non-gratis or whatever that's called. And but I think for the future, when we're talking about moving into bringing in people who tell their stories, or people who whatever, that kind of thing, because we're talking about moving into having people come and do presentations to us. That was kind of the format we were talking about maybe going into, is to contemplate, if that's something where we want to spend some money, giving people stipends for their time.
I support the idea. I just think we don't know what we're asking people to even talk about yet.
Amy,
but
you were
I'm
on
very
mute,
much
so we missed Amy. You were
supporting
on
the idea.
mute. Amy, you were on mute, so we missed like the beginning of what you were saying.
Really? I'm sorry. So I'm just saying I support the idea of paying people, obviously not, the $20,000 speaker circuit type of thing, but something appropriate. But I think here we are kind of at the hour, and we're getting to the whole second subject, which is like what we want them to speak and so forth. But just in general, to respond to that, I don't think we should be always limited to just being able to ask a friend or whatever. There's important topics out there, and if they're relevant and they suit the need that we're looking to fill, I think we should be open to that, which is why I think we have a little bit of a budget for that kind of thing. And sometimes it might just be paying if they're not in town, paying an airfare so they can come in to speak. And a lot of times they just don't want to be in the hole coming to help us. And, so I'm open to that. Just want to say that.
The only thing that I would add is I think it would depend on what the subject is, because what we don't, I guess one of the dangers could be that we are presenting a biased paid opinion to present their point of view because it's something that ideologically we agree with. That's the only, again, that's why I say it depends on the topic. If it's someone from a university speaking about the theory of whatever that town hall meeting is, that makes sense. But if it's more of a objective opinion, then I don't know if that's necessarily would be a neutral position that we're paying them in order for them to make an argument, for lack of better terms. But overall, I am not opposed to it. I think that if we have a speaker that comes down, or a presenter for a town hall or for the speaking series, and they're driving from Milwaukee, I mean, compensation for gas is reasonable, and for their time. That's the only thing that I think that's why I would also be open to the idea.
So I can share the opinion I have. It's okay if we want to engage a speaker, we want to bring them in as a professional to speak. Obviously, budgets have to be considered, and we would have to propose that in front of the board and see if we can get the approval, etc. But the idea with our town halls having multiple presenters was not to have one panelist be paid. I mean, if the person comes in as a speaker for an event, as this person who's going to be, speaking on whatever they bring to the table, and we have, or they're running a show for us, then it's fine. But if someone is a part of a panel, I would disagree to pay one person on the panel and not others. And also I would disagree that we have one town hall where we would offer to pay for panelists, and then for the others we don't, because one may feel like one may seem more important than the other one to pay. So those are kind of like my thoughts. So if we are going forward consider paid panelists, then to Raphael's point, are they providing their own opinion? I mean, they're getting paid for these services, which makes me feel like what we as a council are doing and putting out there for the information that they're sharing is more like, okay, you're paying me, so I'm doing this, da da da. I mean, you know, as part of a panelist, right? I mean, so that's just, I mean, my opinion is, if we want to do it, we put it together as a proposal that going forward, that's what we are going to do with our panelists in our, whether it's in our town hall, or if we're going to have a speaker series, as we've talked about in the past, and we're going to, you know, invite speakers and vet them out and see like what we want to pay them, and then put that across as a requirement to our board, as, you know, a certain budget that we would be anticipating in the year, and then just make that the norm. But I really don't think it should be like one person here, one person there. So
I agree. I agree.
I could just offer a couple of kind of policy type thoughts as you're talking through this and thinking through this as a group. First, I would suggest if you do want to consider compensating speakers, that you think about a maximum dollar amount, criteria for which you would pay. For example, is it only one type of presentation, or is it any presentation regardless of duration? Is it paying mileage if someone is traveling more than X miles from Glencoe to attend? Those can help with not only developing a budget request for future budgets. We do have $12,000 that is in the draft budget that the village board will consider next week at their village board meeting as part of the comprehensive village budget. I should say that they're considering it at the board meeting next week. And so how you choose to use that $12,000 is certainly for the group to discuss. I would suggest that if you want to pay speakers or pay panelists, you have some conversations around how much, under what circumstances, how many times per year, so that way you can inform that and communicate consistent expectations across different programs.
You know, again, with respect to all of your opinions, this sounds like a Glencoe and a New Trier Township that I am not familiar with. I mean, in terms of wealth, it's what, the 10th wealthiest suburb in the United States. In terms of expertise, it's here in Glencoe and in New Trier Township. You don't have to pay for it. It's there for the asking.
But Bob, people that are in this community or in this town or in this district, they all have a certain perspective because of where they work or where they live. And I do think it's extremely valuable to get outside of that bubble and talk to people outside of that. Because if we just keep being insular, even with our experts, we will learn things, but we won't have a more global perspective. And I think that's extremely important. As far as like, you know, you're referencing that like people are wealthy in Glencoe or whatever, like that's not everybody's lived experience either. And I think that even just referencing that just sort of serves the purpose of proving the point, which is that, you know, we have a perspective, or you have a perspective, or I have a perspective that is within certain walls. And I think that we need to be outside of those walls and hear from people that live in different places, have different lived experiences, are in a different socioeconomic experience, are in a different neighborhood experience, are in a different school system. I think that's extremely valuable and very important. And for me personally, the reason that I came onto this committee was not simply to, you know, be around people from Glencoe, but to build bridges between communities. And I don't think that nobody from other communities, you know, aside from maybe 10 minutes away, are going to be coming to our town halls, right? So the only way I think that that's going to happen is if we bring people to speak to our town halls or invite them to be presenters to our groups to have us understand a broader experience beyond what we know.
Well, on that
I think
note,
that
if I may just 1 second, just give everyone a time. We are at almost 6:45. It is late. Sharon has a baby she has to probably take care of. So just in respect of that, your opinions, if you can just draft them in an email and share with Sharon. She's got, everyone's information coming in. And then, we don't have to make this decision today. We can always continue in January and decide, because this is a going forward thing. And if this is something that we want to do as a council, then that's what we will do. But I would really like you all to take this as a thought. And I do want to say, before we go out and fix anything else in the other community, we have Glencoe to fix, and we have to fix things in Glencoe, and that should be our focus. And so I would like to work internally as much as possible and getting awareness out within our community and engagement and involvement from our community.
Okay, I just want to asterisk
So-
that. I'm not talking about fixing any community. I'm just talking about dialoguing with other communities, and that I think that's important. It's not a question of fixing anything.
Well,
But to respond just briefly to Anise, to suggest that people in Glencoe live in a bubble, I think is a stereotype. There is a wide variety of experiences in Glencoe, a wide variety. And we can draw on that here in Glencoe, in New Trier Township. That's a stereotype. We don't live in a bubble, all of us.
I know I don't. My bubble broke
don't.
years ago. All right, guys. So if you could take this back, give it a thought, think about it. Let's think in a very objective manner, because it's numbers. So let's just think about it objectively going forward. If that's how we want to do it, and offer monetary compensation to our panelists or town halls, and then think about if we still want to then have our speaker series, right? Because that's also on our list of potential events for next year. We don't have a very large budget, obviously. And so, I do kind of like that idea of maybe compensating in other ways, such as like what Sharon said about, miles of how far you live and, being compensated for that, and et cetera. Maybe dinner that night or something if you're here late, or something like that. That's also some way of a gratitude that we are showing. So if those kind of ideas come to mind, let's bring those out. We don't have to make a decision today.
Dipti, can I interject for just really quickly? I know we're running short on time, but on the topic of the speaker series, so Amy and I have had a couple of conversations, just kind of high level, like what we want to do on that front. And our just initial thoughts were that if we're going to do it, that they should be in lieu of a specific town hall and not try to layer it on top, just because of both village resources and also community interests. That too many events might water it down. So that was thought one. And then thought two was we started to kick around ideas for specific speakers, but quickly kind of reached the conclusion that we need a little more feedback and I think consensus from the group as to what our objectives are and if they're different from the town halls. And it sounds like most people are, based on today's call, think it might be that an individual speaker might be conveying a message that's different than sort of a debate or discussion that takes place in a town hall. But just for next time, if folks could give that some thought, A, whether we want to do the speaker series, and B, if so, and I personally think it's a good idea, kind of what our goals are, and that'll help us do our research as to who kind of fits the description of what we're trying to accomplish.
I agree. And well put that they are, in my eyes, they're separate, I feel. Town hall and speaker series, but I hope everyone will respond to you. So do they respond to you and Amy, or just actually they can only respond to either
Yeah.
you or Amy?
Yeah, if you want to send me an email or Amy, I think that, yeah, either.
They can only do it to one because of
Yeah,
our,
either or, I guess. And then alternatively, if we just want to think about it and have a short chat at our next meeting, we can do it that way too. So whatever works best for folks.
sounds good. Okay, sorry, we didn't really get to that topic today, but I feel like I think everyone's fatigued a little bit.
Yeah.
I know I've been up since 6:30 and I'm tired as well, so I'm sure you guys are. And I just think about the baby that's there. So Sharon must be like, I gotta get to my baby. So I think we covered pretty much everything. We did touch on marketing as well. So I think we covered that piece. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to discuss today?
There were two things, one of which I think I could cover in a follow-up email to the group related to logos. We had some sample artwork that was put together previously for a past iteration of this group. And I'd be happy to share that. Either now I can breeze through that so you can just get a flavor for it and think about it for a future conversation, or I can send that out by email, whatever you'd prefer.
Let's start with the email, and then that way everyone has had a chance to glance over it, and then we could talk about it in our January. Can it wait till January? I'm guessing it can.
Whatever you prefer.
That would be my preference. Is that okay with you guys? See a few nods.
One other item that I wanted to just make note of is that there was a question that was raised about some dialogue that took place on a private social media group over the last, or a couple of weeks ago before the Thanksgiving and Hanukkah holidays began, related to the village and it not displaying a menorah on public property. That's perhaps a more complex conversation, but I did want to make mention of it since I understand that was a question that had come up among some members from the group. I'm happy to kind of have a precatory conversation this evening, and then that may lead us down the path, if you so choose, of having a more in-depth conversation about some bigger picture things related to it. By way of background, there was a social media post that was made on a private closed Facebook group in which an individual said that the village denied a request from a rabbi to have a menorah displayed on public property and express some thoughts on that. And the post had some other statements that were made in it. The village learned of that secondhand because it was a private closed Facebook group, which means that we can't access it because we're not a member of that group if you're not a Facebook user. Once we learned of that post, there were incorrect statements that were made with regards to the village, what was asked of the village, and several things that were incorrect. Unfortunately, that circulated both online and offline. And there were some different iterations of that we learned about again secondhand from folks as they started calling the village. And those were also incorrect. Setting that incorrect set of statements aside, it did give way to some people sharing some feedback about the Villages Light the Lights event and asking questions about displays of religious symbols on public property. I fielded a number of those calls myself, and what I shared with folks in those conversations was that first of all, we appreciate getting people's feedback about the event or asking questions because it's a good opportunity for dialogue, and we do want to take people's feedback into consideration. The whole point of us doing events is that they're fun and enjoyable. And if they're not, we want to know about that. Second, one of the things that I touched on with people as they called was that the village does not have what's called a public forum. And I'll use that with a lowercase f rather than an uppercase f, like when our group was previously called the Community Relations Forum. What I'm talking about is a physical space, a physical property, a public property in which an external group can display a temporary symbol or structure. Glencoe does not have a public forum space. There are some other neighboring communities that do. I previously worked in a community that had one that would have it roughly from Thanksgiving until the end of the calendar year. And religious entities might display a holiday display, or anyone else who wished could display something there as well, within certain parameters like size, is electricity allowed, things like that, but not regulating what is displayed or the content that is displayed. The village does not display religious symbols on public property because we very quickly get into legal and constitutional issues related to doing so. I'm not a lawyer, so I'd be happy to share more if the group wanted to have a future conversation about that at some point in the future. But I wanted to share that as background and as context. With regards to a public forum, again, and I don't want to take too much time this evening, a public forum, if one is created, must be open to everything, not just religious symbols. It could be a big yellow smiley face. It could be something that people find offensive. It could be something that people find happy. It could be anything and everything. So it is very wide open because the village cannot regulate the speech that is being articulated through that display of that symbol. So that's a bit of context and a bit of background. I know it's a very, very, very brief summary of a complex topic. And so if the group, I know the group is planning some, or has some subcommittee working on an event of some kind to celebrate diversity within the community. And I would continue to encourage those conversations to take place and for this group to be focused on those planning efforts. Certainly there can be opportunities to incorporate not only cultural diversity, but religious diversity or other dimensions of diversity. But I did want to share that background since I know that the conversation had kind of percolated among some group members, and I know I'd heard from a few. So if that's a discussion that you'd like to have in more detail, not specific to the original social media post, but the bigger picture discussion items, we can certainly tee that up for a future meeting. You don't have to decide that today, of course, but I did just want to address that since it was pretty proximate from a timing standpoint.
So Sharon, thanks for raising it. I do think that I have a couple points of view, but I would like, I guess, in short form, I'd say, yeah, I don't know how we can not talk about it when this is the purpose of our group. And so on one level, I think when I heard about it, I was kind of offended that the village didn't think it important enough for this group to have called a meeting to have that discussion at the time. So I guess I just, take it for what it's worth. I think that's telling as to how the management views the affect of our group. But I just don't understand how Santa and kind of, if you will, lighting of a Christmas tree can be on property, and that's not viewed as any, that's like one thing, but then everything else that could be, of the like 14 religions that we have represented in this village, that all of a sudden is a different set of rules. So I would like to understand that. I know that's not a tonight kind of thing, but those are my two thoughts. So.
Yeah, questions are well taken. The deeper dive is certainly is certainly there, I think, for the second question that you asked. The first question, though, I will say that this transpired very, very quickly, and it's not for the village management having a lack of desire to include this group. It literally transpired overnight. And so that was something that we were working through. And again, we were to a degree kind of flying blind, not being privy to the dialogue as it was happening and hearing about it and finding out about it secondhand in pieces. So there was a lot that we needed to work through, not the least of which is the more prospective conversations around whether it's specific to an event or whether it's related to a broader public policy question, like a public forum or talking about displays of religious symbols. I think to your point, Amy, that is a very complex conversation and one that I'd be happy to gather some more resources on. That's one that I would maybe want to spend some time on and have a less full agenda when we talk about it, because it is a more substantial topic. I wouldn't want to try to cram it in a few minutes.
I'd like to think that we could use the clergy organization that is, in our village and has been on our panels and I think very helpful to us to give us some maybe input as well, because then as far as I understand, there ended up being an event on public space at Cock Park, then a week later that wasn't, or 10 days later, that wasn't originally planned, that did focus on, if you will, just one group. So I'm confused, I guess, at a minimum, that like different standard.
The only thing I want to say is I am not on social media, and I actually do not believe everything that is said on social media. We don't know what's true and what's not. And it's very simple to blast anything and say whatever and have people just continue with it. And, you can ruin businesses, you can ruin people's reputations, you can do everything. So how much truth was there to everything that was being said or assumed or, factually stated? We don't know. But I would not go based on what is on social media said by some person, because that's why I don't even engage on responding to any social media that is just kind of, hearsay, unless it comes from the person who was involved in this instance, what Sharon said about the rabbi. So if it didn't come from him, then I would not believe it. So fact checking is important. I don't think we're a council who has to jump on and respond to everything that has been made noise for social media. Like yesterday, there was noise about Poppy's pizza, about how horrible their pizza is and just because it didn't match someone's palate. This is social media. I don't agree with it. There have to be some facts. And so we have to be careful before jumping into everything as a council. I'm not saying from a village perspective, the village should absolutely take their stand and do all the necessary due diligence and meet and respond. But I'm saying from a council perspective, I think the best that we could do is meet with the village. Maybe we could have a couple of representatives from our council who meet with the village on those topics to understand really if this is an issue, if it's blown out of proportion like this on social media, and if there's anything that we can do to help. But if there are no facts and it's just like, it's social media.
Yeah, but you still have to, I think you have to have a strategy for how here we are trying to enhance the community of inclusion. And at the same time, if we have, I guess what I had heard, 68, almost 70 people commenting about anti-Semitism in our village, we should at the very least be informed, right? I'm not saying that they're right by any stretch, but how do you not get the facts at the time is the point. So I feel like it kind of takes away from what we're trying to do.
It does, but then again, how much, are you going to respond to every single one and try to, convince them? This is social media. Some of them just get on there just to make noise and to make it difficult. So I mean, we could go on and on about it. I'm not a fan of it. I would never believe anything that I read on social media unless it's from a trusted source or from the source itself as a fact.
But I think the fact is a bigger discussion has to happen, and I don't think it has anything to do with social media. I think it has to do with representation and people having feelings about that. And that's not about social media. And I think that's what Amy's talking about. And I think that's what Sharon's talking about. And I think
There's-
that's what we need to be talking about.
Yeah, I
There's
think,
kind of-
I think Anise is correct. You hit it on the head.
There's really kind of two aspects to that. And certainly we can tee up a discussion at another meeting. Again, I would suggest that that be probably the only agenda item for that meeting, because this is a meatier topic. And Amy, just the questions that you raised are very, very good questions. I can answer a lot of them. And I may bring in another resource to help share more on that. But that speaks to the complexity of this, that this is not an easy topic. And there are a lot of layers to it. There is a legal component to it that the village must be mindful of. And then there is a public perception component to it. And so those are sometimes the same and those are sometimes different. And so those are the things that I'd be happy to talk through more and bring in additional resources as needed to talk through more. As well as processes. For example, the special event that was held on the 5th was a permitted special event on Park District property. The village also has special event permits that it issues for discrete special events. And in fact, that event organizer was working with both the village and the Park District to secure a location. I was working directly on that. So I can speak firsthand on that. And the Park District site happened to pan out first. And so the organizer went with that option because that option panned out about a few hours before ours. So there's a lot of nuances here is my point. So there's a lot of layers for us to peel back in these conversations, and they are good dialogues for us to have.
So given that the next meeting, it'll be January, I think we need to be focused on town hall. Does it make sense, given that there was this event, if you will, this kind of uprising that happened, right or wrong? Could we schedule a call in between or some shortly after that? And for anybody who's interested in participating, it doesn't have to be mandatory, just to be informed, because it sounds like you have things to offer, but we're going to have the next 2 meetings are going to be focused on other things, right? And so seems like I just
If you do want to have a second.
Well, sorry. I was saying that can we have a non-public meeting, which is not really considered a council meeting, but have a meeting with members of the village to discuss this?
No more than 2 members from the council could do that.
Well, let me ask that, Sharon, is this issue something that the village plans to address to the community more broadly than just the committee, such that, it sounds like Amy's looking to get a little more information. Is there a plan to address this?
That's a great question.
Broadly?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're still working through that and thinking through how we might have dialogue on this topic. If this group wants to have a second meeting, I would suggest scheduling it in January. There are some conflicts coming up next week with village board meetings, and then we're barreling toward the end of the year when I know we have some folks who have other commitments. So I would suggest that in January if you would like to have a second meeting, or perhaps since the town hall will be in February, repurpose that February meeting unless there's last minute logistics that need to be talked about. That could be an option as well.
Okay.
And these constitutional law issues are meaty.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't even do a good job of playing one on TV.
Okay, I'll give you some thought. I'll give you a call, Sharon, and just see what kind of makes sense. Seems like I'm maybe the one speaking up, but I'll just to see if it would make sense to have a shorter conversation, maybe in person with one or two people that are mostly interested in it, and then figure out if a February meeting makes sense or whatever. So
Or the other idea I have is, don't we have a village board meeting of the, what is it? Meeting of the whole? What is it? Committee of the whole?
Committee of the whole, excuse me. Yep.
And can this be addressed with the village board there as well? As like to address Amy's questions and concerns as to how the community in general is, like what next steps are planned?
I just want to interject really quickly because Amy said, maybe it's only her and, you're saying it's Amy's whatever, and it's not. Like, I feel like we're all invested in this. I care deeply about it. It sounds like John cares and Bob. I mean, I think that
And I care.
you're not alone
So, yeah,
in what you're
please,
thinking and feeling. I don't want you to feel like you're alone.
well, no, she's not alone. And so what I'm asking is, and I care, Anise, in case if you missed that part, but what I'm trying to say is, let's find a way to get in with the village to talk about this. So if it's not a meeting of our council, maybe we can meet with either in a committee of the whole. And I don't know how those, formalities work.
If I could weigh in on that bit I do know. We work with the village board to set their agenda for committee of the whole meetings. January is pretty full on their docket for committee of the whole. Let me take that back as something for me to visit about with our staff and follow up with this group. Happy to have individual conversations if anybody would like to chat between now and then. It's a heavy topic. It's a lot of ground to cover. I'm not doing it justice right now, but I did want to acknowledge it because of the proximity of timing. And I certainly hear all the questions and the points of feedback, and that this is a topic of interest for the group. So let me take this back, talk with the village manager and our staff about how we might structure these conversations, starting with this group. And I'll come back to you with more on that. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sounds great. All right, so I think we're done.
Okay.
I have, is there a member of the public who wants to raise any comments? Or are there any public comments?
There are none by email. I see no hands raised, so I think we are ready for a motion to adjourn if you all are.
Oh, great. May I please have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
Okay.
Can I have a roll call?
Okay. I'm just going to go on my screen in the order that I see everyone signed in. So forgive me, I'm going to go out of order. Chairperson Clark,
Yes.
Member Guzman,
Yes.
Member Young,
Yes.
Member Mizell,
yes.
Member Moses,
Yes.
Member Bjork.
Yes.
Did I get everybody?
Great.
Yes.
I think you
Okay.
did.
And
Thank
we are
you.
adjourned.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Have a nice evening. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.